please pronounce your names correctly and give me a little bit of background on your career, life, whatever you feel is most interesting and compelling for the listeners?
My name is Madeleine Kay. I'm an artist and an activist from the UK. I'm a campaigner, and I'm mainly known for campaigning against Brexit under the pseudonym EU Supergirl. But I've campaigned on a lot of different issues, and I was awarded Young European of the Year in 2018 and the EU Charlemagne Youth Prize in 2020.
And I'm Kristyna Ilek. I'm from Prague, and I'm a dramaturg and a researcher and a producer sometimes. And I've spent the past, I don't know how many years living abroad. So so I've been working in the UK, in the Netherlands. Yeah, that's about it. And I think that's enough.
Did we meet
I don't
already?
think I saw you at the panel talk, but I don't think we've actually met. But I think that I know that you live in Prague, right?
Right. Yeah, that's why I was like, there was somebody I met who we were talking about Prague, and I
No, it
don't think
wasn't
it was
me, no,
you.
but it's super. I kind of want to ask, what are you doing in Prague? But I guess I'll ask later.
Oh, no, I'm in Prague because my wife is Czech.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, well, she wanted to go to school, and for her as a Czech citizen, of course, schooling's free there. So she got her master's degree.
Yeah.
And then we want to have a child, which, of course, is socialized medicine and the massive 3-year maternity leave. So we decided to stick around to use all of the socialized opportunities. And then once all those are all done, we will leave.
That's a good plan.
How do you teach online then?
I do, but that I'm going to have to edit out actually now that I've said this out loud, because my school in the United States believes I live in the United States.
Yeah.
Which technically I have permanent residence there, so like I do live there.
Yeah.
But
we won't tell anyone, don't worry.
It's okay. I mean, if they ever found this podcast, they would be fully aware that I'm not in the United States, because everything is about, so I live in Prague, and I live in Prague. So, yeah. Anyways. All right. So the two of you were part of this, what's it? Think tanks for the Destructa Forum, correct? Is that phrased correctly?
Destructura.
Destructura. Okay. I'm sure I mispronounced that, but destructura.
There we go.
Yeah. That's like the American version of destructura, so it's totally correct.
Yeah, my butchered, horrible language skills come out quite frequently. It's okay.
I'm sure you're great.
But no, I'm really bad at it. But that's why I have you pronounce your names, because like I don't even know how to pronounce people's names. But anyways, so the two of you were part of the think tank revolving around funding.
Correct.
I love this topic.
It's your favorite topic.
It is absolutely, like, I would say my second most favorite topic, outside of like having to write text about our art. That's my second other favorite topic. So
why?
Why
is it your favorite topic?
What, funding?
Yeah.
Because it is the most nebulous, misunderstood, non-transparent process in the entire thing. Like
and everyone relies on
it. Exactly. Well, I mean, but like selling a piece of art or selling tickets to an event or anything like this, like those are very transparent, very obvious. Funding, so whether that's grant funding or sponsorships or anything like that, totally not transparent at all. Like you can put in months worth of effort to write an application, you send it in, and you get one of two answers, yes or no. And that's it. If it's yes, you don't know why. And if it's no, you also don't know why. So how can you get better? And it drives me fucking nuts. But anyways, let's go back to...
I actually know why I got funding from the European Cultural Foundation. Because I had a chat with my grant officer after they'd awarded it to me. And she basically told me that on the day that they received my application, they'd seen some news media piece that I featured in. And then they received my application and they were like, oh yeah, she's famous, or she's got publicity, that'll be good for us.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Oh, I shouldn't have told you that.
Well, but that's just like the nature of like right place, right time kind of an idea, which is like
Mm.
literally that entire thing came down and worked to your advantage due to timing,
Yeah.
which I find very sad because it has nothing to do, nothing personal to you, but it has nothing to do directly with merit or quality or any. It's just like, oh, they're famous, they're in the news, we should fund them. Like, hey, like, oh gosh. So, anyways, why, when you all went into this funding think tank, what were some of the issues that you all, enough of my soapboxing, what were some of the issues that you all thought were important to think about and address?
Well, I'm thinking now that you should have joined our think tank because you would have loved it. But but well, we were all together, I think, 9 participants in that group. And so everyone had their kind of own experience or non-experience with funding. So that was kind of important. So at the start, we tried to, um, yeah, like talk to each other, which was more or less difficult, like in like an online environment. But I think we kind of managed. And then we yeah, thought about the areas that we want to cover that kind of bother us the most, or that we know the least about. So there was actually quite a few. I don't know if you if it will make sense, like go through them one by one, or how should we approach it? Madalena, what do you think?
Well, I think we had a broad range of perspectives within the think tank. So people that had different experiences with funding. For example, the girl from Georgia, she had like experience of being part of an organization and managing to get funding from the EU via the Creative Europe scheme. Whereas like me, most of my funding, it's come from like crowdfunding or a few grants that I've been successful in getting. And then like others in the group, they had like, I mean, all of us have had the experience of just applying, doing so many applications, wasting so much time and energy and getting nothing as a result. And that's like a shared experience across all of them. And some people have had those few times where it's been successful and others not at all. And they've just been struggling.
Yeah, I think it was kind of nice actually that like some people came with a lot of experience and some people came with the interest in like, oh, I want to know more about this. I need to know more about this, and that kind of also illustrates how little we actually know as artists. I mean, we came up with the term creative worker instead of an artist, so we can use it. We don't have to, but it's I think it kind of shows how even like formal education doesn't really give you anything at all. And if you don't have formal education as an artist or a creative person, then again you have to educate yourself on your own, and it's really really difficult. And for me, one of my like personal motivations perhaps was the kind of almost like a healthy environment that funding creates in the arts. And on the one hand, I really like to work in art industry, but but funding is really, really difficult. So then people turn to, you end up working for free a lot, and you end up doing favors and receiving favors in return and all that. And it's very, on the one hand, it's very like resourceful and kind of it's super nice to see everyone's enthusiasm. That's like the only good part, but then also it can become so exploitative, and all sorts of weird like hierarchies get established, and there's kind of nothing to kind of protect you, especially when you're a young emerging artist coming into it and trying to like, I don't know, just make it happen. So I think that's why I was thinking I don't have too much experience with receiving funding, so I was in that other group. But I just know that the way that it's done now, I don't like it. And so I thought, well, sure, I'll just join this think tank and change it. So yeah.
Just to be clear, this podcast is funded by a grant from the EEA, so I'm appreciative of grants, though I generally find the entire process of the waste of time of having to write, like, if you're lucky, you write 10 grants in order to get one,
I'd say
kind
one
of
in a
thing.
hundred. I'd say one in a hundred.
I was being generous, but I mean, but it's hard because, like, you would think it, like, I'll be honest, I know that the reason why I received the grant that I did, which was a reasonably substantial grant for sort of a standalone grant, was because the I was the only English speaking person to apply in the Czech Republic. And so they sort of put me on as a test to see if running it through as an English person would work. So I'm just a test case.
Ah.
Well, I appreciate the transparency that both of you kind of like share, you know, in terms of how you receive certain fundings. That's and they're also quite funny. And yeah.
Well, I mean, but the problem with it was like for instance, mine, and I feel really bad because I'm sure my funders are going to hear this, but the criteria that they set up for receiving this funding was so specific that in the end, like they had this grant, it was available for I think like 4 years. And they had enough funds to give out to like 10 grants over the course of that 4 years. And in that 4 years, nobody qualified for it. So they didn't give any funds out until literally the last of the 4 years because they just had to give it out. And so they sort of lessened their criteria because like they had such stringent criteria. They wanted people who were in the arts who have a business that has been running for more than 3 years. Well, most people in the arts don't have a business. Period.
If they have a business, it does not last 3 years.
That's right, and then it doesn't last 3 years. So it's like they set it up with a bureaucratic mind of like, well, this will show that they are this kind of responsible and blah 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 blah, not thinking that that's not actually how the arts works. And that's how I feel like a lot of funding models are created, which is very unfortunate. I've got to get off my soapbox and let you all talk, though.
The funding models, funding applications, funding process is created by people that do not understand the arts and do not understand artists and how they work and the environment in which they're working. And I think Kristyna will agree with me that we actually put forward proposals that were to try and challenge that as well. So, you know, one of the proposals that we put forward was for that the EU to create a standardized and simplified application form that is accessible in a variety of formats for people, you know, that are visual thinkers and maybe dyslexic, or, you know, something that's accessible. But also the creation of this needs to be done with artists informing the whole process and the outcome, because at the moment the application like forms, you just look at them and your brain melts because it's just like numbers and boxes and so many words, you just can't make sense of what the hell it is that they want from you.
Well, the difficulty of what you just said, which I agree with what you just said, is that you're expecting the funders to put in more work. And they're not trying to put in work. They're just trying to give out money, and they don't want to work any harder to give money out. They want to work convenient,
if
easy.
They wanted it to be convenient, they wouldn't make the system complex. They're just doing what is easy for them.
Correct.
And what is easy for them is what they're used to and what they've always done before. And it's just a lack of creativity and also a lack of due diligence and care about making the process accessible in order to achieve equality, diversity, and inclusion. It's like they don't even care about that.
I think it's almost like, also, I agree. And I also think that it kind of like represents the kind of like relationship between art and other industries and other professions. And art always comes out like whatever kind of art, like we're speaking in very, very broad terms. So I do not want to like generalize too much, but yeah, it's kind of easy to be like to put like art as this like, yeah, like it's just somewhere, it's a bit different, it's like somewhere aside, and it's like creative crazy world, and then so there is like a strange, so there's a misunderstanding, I feel like, almost from the funders, and then using those forms for applications that don't work. I don't think they're doing it because they do not want to fund art, even though that's, I mean, perhaps, yeah, that's like another maybe point. But also they just don't, I don't think they know any different. And that's maybe their and way of seeing maybe the world and just the process, and they think that that's how it should be done, whereas art doesn't really function, as at least in my opinion, on like how things should be done. That like literally art is like an opposite of that. So I think it's almost like more like a theoretical, conceptual kind of misunderstanding that is coming out. For example, through like super weird and strange for me forms. Um, yeah, it's bizarre. We're hoping. I'm really hoping that with the proposal that we suggested, we could at least trial out maybe an application form and see if, make it with artists, make it with the people who it is intended for. But yeah, I guess we'll see.
Well, what something you brought up there is something that I've often asked about too, which is like a consistent vernacular. Because, for instance, I'll give you an example. I looked around Europe trying to find what I call travel grants, which is what we call it in the United States. Well, in certain parts of Europe, those are referred to as mobility grants. But some mobility grants are for traveling within a country. So if I wanted to travel from Rome to Venice, that would be a mobility grant. But other countries, a mobility grant is if you want to go from Rome to Paris, to a different country. So even like the same terms don't even mean the same things depending on where you're looking. And I find that a bit ridiculous. We should come up with a consistent vernacular.
I think it can make it extremely hard to like find appropriate funding or to be aware of it. And I know that like when I've applied for grants and received them, some like it's only because somebody else has made me aware that even the grant exists, or when I received my awards, like somebody nominated me for Young European of the Year. It wasn't even me that did it. Like people send things to you because they know you, and it's. I think that the funders don't even put in adequate resources into publicizing their opportunities, and that means that there's not equity of access to them.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's really strange. It's like no one ever tells you, and like I mean, obviously, like it depends on like each individual and stuff like that, to figure your things out and what you want to do, how you're gonna do it. And I totally like, yeah, that's how it is. Perhaps, but then also it is just really, really difficult, even if you wanna like like a part of your arts career. And this is I'm not saying anything new. I feel like we all know it, but it's like you need to do so many jobs at the same time, and like being like doing your craft or your art or whatever is like a small percentage of all the other things that you have to do. And one of them is educating yourself on those opportunities. So yeah, it's honestly it's a joke. It's a bit of a joke.
Well, I mean, that whole idea of like educating yourself on the opportunities. I mean, I could go back when I was in high school. This is really pathetic, but I was in high school and I was like, oh, I want to go do an artist residency. I mean, I hadn't even been an artist. I was just like, I want to do one. That sounds like fun. And I found a book that was like 300 pages thick of just artist residencies. Yeah, it was a book. This is pre-internet, just to date myself. But there was this book of like 300 pages of artist residencies just in France. And then I found out there's like another 200-page one for the Netherlands and another 200-page one for, I mean, the sheer volume of opportunities, whether it be funding in general, grants, artist residencies, and then even exhibition opportunities or performance opportunities. The sheer volume of them, and quite honestly, in my opinion, the sheer volume of bad ones that have proliferated in the past 15, 20 years that really are not beneficial and end up sort of costing you more and don't help your CV or your reputation in any way whatsoever is also a big problem. These sort of, I don't know what you would call it, like inappropriate, unprofessional things.
The term that we decided on in the group for those was predatory ops,
Good.
like
Yep.
predatory journals, because they're feeding on the artist, they're taking resources away from them, and it's for their own benefit. It's usually because they're art washing, or they want to publicize their company or their organization or something in some way. And that is like I get emails all the time, and it infuriates me when they've found out specific information about me, identified maybe some artworks that I've made for my website, and they email you with, we really like this artwork, we'd really like to display it in this blah blah blah, just click through here to find out how, and it takes you to a paywall, or even worse, the ones where they try to lure you in. Like I received an email, a scam recently, where they tried to lure you into doing an interview, and then only later in the process they tell you that you have to pay to be published in this journal. it really infuriates me, because it's like we're not even making money from our normal work, and then people are sapping on us, and we're like prey to them. And that was also one of the issues we tried to address, because we put in a proposal that the EU could provide a European-wide platform online for vetted opportunities, that are actually of benefit to artists, and they're all centralized in one place, so everybody knows where to look, and they know that these are going to be good opportunities. That was one of our proposals
I
that
would
we
even
suggested.
caveat that, like, I don't think it's just like as simple as like predatory or non-predatory, but I think there's also sort of a hierarchy of them, because like there are some, I can think of a couple galleries I know that like they're not great galleries, and maybe they're slightly predatory because maybe you like pay a fee kind of thing, but it's a nominal fee, and it actually is a nominal fee, and it does put something on your CV, and you do physically get an exhibition. So like there's like slight predatory to like absurdly predatory. So like I think there could be a graded system out of that instead of just a good or bad.
I think it comes down to the issue of transparency. We actually had an interesting discussion in the group with someone who is a manager, and they raised the point that like yeah, but venues kind of need to like sustain themselves, and it makes sense that if we offer like the artists kind of if they're coming for, and lots of residencies are actually paid, and upfront how much you pay and kind of what you get. And then obviously some artists cannot afford that at that stage of their career, and some kind of can treat the residency as an investment almost, right, in their career. Like it's like, oh yeah, I'll go to this and this place, and I know how much I'll pay, and I can afford that, and then because of that, later I'll be, it's like an investment basically. And I think the issue is just being transparent about it, like explain why you need that amount of money to have an artist in residence. What are you spending it on? And I think, I mean, like from my experience, the either I didn't really even bother applying for residencies where I would have to pay. I was thinking like, oh, so I'll go somewhere, it's gonna be so much hassle. I'll get there and then I'll have to pay. That was a bit of a joke, but um, it's like sometimes like they explain to you what they will provide you with, but then I don't know, I would even appreciate just like an explanation on why, like why are they unable to get it, and why are they offering that opportunity if they know that they will have to ask the artist. It's about honesty as well.
One of the members of our group had a suggestion actually to combat this issue that you just said, and that is to have like a rating system. So like TripAdvisor or something, people can rate their experience, and then others will know, is this a 5-star
Yeah.
opportunity? Is this a 1-star?
Oh my God, that's the greatest like artistic website thing idea. Like, could you imagine a website that basically like was Yelp reviews of artist residencies or grants as to whether or not they were like easy, worthwhile, etc., etc. That would be amazing.
I think it would also be like improve the market for ops, because if like some ops get really badly rated, they'll have less people applying. So then they're going to improve the standard and the quality of what they're offering.
Yeah, I know. But because that's how business works. And from their side of perspective of this, all this is a business.
And we live in a capitalist society, so you have to play by the rules of the game.
Yes. It's sad but true. I mean, but see, okay, that's a whole like aspect of this whole funding thing. That's a big thing that I think a lot of people get into the arts, like any sort of creative industry, whatever, based on romantic ideas that they either read in books, saw in movies, or had when they were whatever young and had some experience. And then what they don't understand, and I'm probably just projecting because like I had these ideas and possibly still do, these very romantic ideas of what the artist lifestyle is. But the fact of the matter is that no matter what aspect of the arts you're in, whether you're a practicing artist or you're working for a gallery or a granting organization, it's always a business.
To be honest, I do agree. Like, surely there are people who kind of have those ideas, but I also, at least in like my social circles, it's just people who are just really passionate about what they do, and there are no dreams. It's very realistic, and they know pretty much what their situation is, and they're just trying to make it happen because they do something that they love, and or something that they really think that is helping the world and making it a better, nicer place. This is like a very naive, like, I mean, I'm not judging, their opinions. It's just the way that I'm talking about it. I realize that it might sound a bit like, yeah, well, art can't change the world. I think it kind of can, but that's like another discussion. But also, yeah, you had a point at the end, and then I was so eager to like get this out that I forgot what else I wanted to say. But I think people are definitely getting into art from actually very like like different places, and the like idealizing art. Yes, you were talking about business, that it's business. There's definitely something that I feel like doesn't get mentioned enough. So I agree. Like, and again, I would see this as almost like lack of education. So on the one hand, we don't have, enough information about how to get funding, where to get funding, like anything. Like, and then also almost like no one ever mentions like, oh, by the way, it's a business. And it's like, yeah, maybe that is clear, and maybe sometimes I don't know. Maybe that might come across as like naive, like not being aware enough that it's a business. But then again, like maybe also artists sometimes, like to think in kind of different models and patterns and structures, and they wouldn't like maybe realizing that it's like business. That like I don't think I think many artists don't want their art to be business.
I actually stumbled into the arts from the opposite side. So, like, my career's advice at school was like, don't do art. It's not a proper job. Do a proper subject. Keep your art as your hobby. And like, I tried to follow that advice. And I did go to university to study politics, philosophy, and economics, which is like what all the prime ministers study.
Oh yeah, that's way more. There's lots more money in philosophy than art.
But, well, there certainly is in economics.
Okay.
I couldn't hack it. I can't cope in that environment. It's not me. And like anyone that like actually knew me who would have given me advice would have been like, everything that you do is creative. You're always like coming up with ideas and imagination and putting it in drawings and music and all these things. Like, it was insane that I did that, and I dropped out, and it messed up, and I went to art because I had nothing else, because it was I had to do, just to survive, just to keep going, just to make sense of the world and what was happening. And then now, my art is very driven by like a cause, or like something that I care passionately about. I want to make the world a better place, and I'm not good at arguing. I'm not good at conflict. I would be a terrible politician, um, because I'm not assertive enough. So all the time that I care passionately about something, I put it not into anger, but into something creative. And that's why I do it and why I keep going. But it's really hard, and they're just like, there isn't enough funding available to do things, and yeah, it's very, very frustrating.
I agree.
Right. I mean, but the nature of the part, the fact that like it's a business kind of thing and it needs to be treated that way is because like I always take it to I'm a visual artist, so I sort of come to it from a visual artist kind of perspective. Because like let's say there's a stone sculptor or a metal sculptor. I mean, that person is going to have to buy some hard cost things. They have to buy metal, they have to buy stone, they have to buy tools in order to produce their works. So it is a business for those kinds of people that have hard costs like that. But even though you could expand that easily enough to authors or actors or anything like this, because they still need time and space away from whatever it is that they do to make money, to be able to focus on their craft, to be able to do that well also. So I mean, whether it's a hard cost, a physical object that the creative people need, or whether it's literal just the ability to not have to work and have the time and space to be able to come up with their conceptual ideas, or physically just like the time to produce something, we all need something that comes from some form of a commerce.
Um, Maybe.
I'm not sure if I'm being overly pessimistic or you're being overly naive, but I think we're balancing each
Yeah.
other pretty well.
One of the discussions that we had in our group was like, one of the proposals was to just generally increase funding for the arts. That's a big ask, but say to governments, more public funding into the arts, because artists aren't really legitimized as public workers in the way that, like doctors are, teachers are, police officers are. These are all publicly funded, and it is a decision of the policymakers that they want to prioritize in society health, security, teaching, etc., and that they don't care about arts. And there's consequences to that because I think arts and culture are incredibly important for societal well-being, mental health, and I think that's why one of the reasons we have like a mental health crisis now when people can't access arts and explore creativity and express themselves. But also, it impacts on those people that have made that really hard decision to go into the arts despite the lack of funding, because it means that we live very precarious lifestyles where we can't even afford to keep making our art, or if we do, we suffer consequences of that, whether it's on our physical or mental well-being. But also, something that Kristyna touched on earlier was that it forces us to rely on alternative economies, and there are consequences to relying on unregulated systems and economies where it's like by favor or exchange of non-monetary goods, and quite often it leads to coercive behavior, manipulative behavior, and just being put into really difficult and dangerous situations. I know I've experienced that personally and felt like that my personal safety was at risk, or that someone was manipulating me in a way that was damaging to my mental health. And that is what not funding the arts is doing.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, I've got a question though. You all are both European, and you're coming to this. You're constantly saying that the public should be funding it, so the government should be funding it, and all this kind of stuff. I come from America, so I keep thinking, why aren't private organizations or people somehow inputting? Like they could come up with in Europe, they could come up with some sort of thing like if a corporation says we will, set aside X million euros to give to the arts, that they could get some tax deduction or some write off of some amount of money. So like the government, instead of the government actually putting money in, could simply make it more beneficial for corporations to give money to the arts. It's just another option.
It just sounds so shady. Like that cannot happen. What the hell? Sorry, I'm not sure if. Sorry. It's like no, come on.
Okay, so you're all against private funding. I get it. That's
We did some research into this because we were looking at institutions and how they're funded, and I was looking through the Tate and seeing the kind of corporations or personal individuals that are sponsoring the art shows, and it's like Deutsche Bank and other banks and Hyundai and BMW and firms that maybe ethically some artists wouldn't be happy of like aligning with those corporations. But also, what I discovered was that like Sotheby's was also sponsoring certain shows, and it's like if they're making
no,
commission,
that's a conflict of
yeah,
interest.
exactly. If they're making a commission on artworks and they can pay for those artworks to be exhibited in mainstream institutions, they're profiting from their own investment in those shows. And it's the same with private individuals sponsoring particular shows or particular artists. It's like private individuals having the right to choose which artists can make it and be successful artists. It's totally wrong, and it leads to elitism and lack of diversity and inclusion.
Wait,
And
I'm sorry. Are you expressing that there's elitism in the arts world? That is a shocking discovery. I had no idea.
so I had an interview actually. I applied to Oxford University to study at the Ruskin School of Art, right? And I went to the interview at the art school, and they looked at my portfolio, and I'd been doing a lot of work with community-based work. I was working with people from disadvantaged backgrounds, homeless people, young carers, and working on environmental arts, because I could get funding to do that stuff. And also because I thought it was like a good thing for society. Anyway, they looked at my portfolio and this was the question that they asked me. How do you think you are going to fit in a place like this? That was an interview question at Oxford University.
Did you expect something different from Oxford?
I think I was delusional.
Okay, I mean,
I think
I
I
totally would have expected something
I
like
had
that.
misconceptions. Well, the thing was, and I pointed this out to them, they were at the time constructing a new gallery in order to increase engagement with the public. But I naively thought that meant that they wanted to do like more outreach and benefit the, engagement with the public and engaging them with art processes and things. And I think it is actually just like a PR exercise for them. They want to push their ideas onto the public.
Yes. Their idea of more accessibility to the arts is putting in a wheelchair ramp. Like that's
I'm
it.
really wondering how they like honestly meant that question. It's like, I mean, obviously the situation it's ridiculous, like the whole thing that you described, and yeah, it is a PR exercise. But I'm honestly thinking about the thought process that someone went through to to then feel like it's okay to ask that question and even then ask it. Like I really don't understand.
I don't think they think it through. I think it comes from innate sort of privilege, is their
It's
automatic
just so
just
strange. Like,
response.
Yeah, not to say that I understand that, but my uncle was actually a professor at Oxford, so I kind of
fair
understand.
enough.
If somebody was in the United States and they said, "Oh, I went to Harvard," and they asked that same kind of question, I would just be like, "Yeah, you that's what they would ask." I totally understand. Same with like Yale. If you went to Yale MFA and that was one of their questions, I would be like, "Okay."
I was naive. I
Well,
will admit
to admittedly, I will say, okay, so I will defend the side of academia a smidge on that. I am not defending them
Mhm.
asking that question, but I'm defending it in the manner that it's a reasonably legitimate question, because if to a certain extent they're wanting to know if you have the ability to defend your position. That's part of being an artist, is the ability to defend your choices. So they're sort of putting you on the spot, pushing you into a corner, seeing if you can intellectually and effectively express your position and convince them. And if you could have done that, even if it was a bunch of bullshit, they probably would have
But then like that's
appreciated that.
another like wrong thing, right? Like why does it have to be like that? Like I understand like the world is like a super wild, dangerous place and all that, and we have to fight for what we're expressing and etc. etc. But that's also a choice. That is something that like that societies are creating for themselves, like this like actually kind of unhealthy competition. I mean, yeah, like we could have a bigger discussion about that, but um I yeah, it's a choice. Like someone is deliberately trying. I mean, not like one person, but obviously like larger structures and are trying to make it that way so that yeah, I don't know. It's in my like view on the world, I'm a bit like, this is so weird. I actually had a question for Madalena. I'm not sure if I can ask, but
Yeah, go to it.
well, I was wondering because this is I actually didn't know about this experience that you had, and I was wondering if you, um, how did you feel in that moment? If you feel comfortable sharing, obviously, and also, would you even want to be a part of that? If like, yeah.
the thing is, in British society, we're like indoctrinated to like look up to people like Boris Johnson and the Tories and those people that have come from insanely privileged backgrounds, studying at like Eton, private schools, and then going on to Oxford and Cambridge. And those are lauded as like the highest valued people in our society. So even though I went to like a state school, which was like a sports college that had no funding for the arts whatsoever, it had been ingrained in my psyche that you have to aspire to this. And like I put in so much work. I did really well in my I did the international baccalaureate. I achieved the full marks, which is really rare. And I just thought that I've put in all this effort, therefore I should be able to be at the top. But in that moment, they asked me this question, and I was genuinely shocked. I was I was I and it was because I was naive about how they actually are and how elitist they are, and how inaccessible their system is to people who aren't from privileged backgrounds. But I was also shocked by their hypocrisy because they were supposedly trying to do more outreach to the public, and but they weren't. They were doing it in their own interests, and I think that it just resonated with me how self-serving they are and self-reinforcing their privilege and their elitism, and how inaccessible that is to the rest of society. And that is probably why nowadays I have such a grudge against any kind of authority, and especially Boris Johnson and the Tory party. People in positions of power who exploit that power, and take advantage of other people. If there's one thing that makes me angry, it's those people.
Yes.
All right. So to try and bring this back to the funding issues in the arts, something that it's sort of relevant, because I thought about this, is like when you're applying for a school and they ask you like what makes you fit here, in the same way as when you're writing a grant or a proposal or anything like this, or seeking any form of funding, even from a sponsor or whatever kind of way you do it. What about the issue that a lot of times artists are, I'm not going to say they're enforced to, but like they are encouraged to tailor their work to a funding model. So like you change, like you were saying, Magdalena, you were saying that you did a lot of like outreach and like children and youth and homeless stuff because you could get funding for it.
Well, it wasn't just because I could get funding for it.
Right. But it's an aspect
Funding enabled me to do it.
That's right. And it's an aspect that's sort of important these days, that sometimes it's necessary to adjust your work to fit the financial opportunities.
I think actually it's one of those things that like we, as in artists and creative workers, believe that we should do. But actually, during so destructura organized a series of workshops for us before we all met in Tallinn, and a few of them were on transparency and funding and kind of like mental health and all that. And there was one about residencies as well. And I can't actually remember who said it, so apologies for not like quoting them and giving them credit, but it was super useful. And if they're listening, they will know who they were, because they said that like it was like an advice, like look for the residencies that really fit your work. There's enough out there. Obviously, maybe you might not know, and they're difficult to find, but try not fitting in those. Obviously, like there needs to be some kind of coherence, and like, you know, if you're applying for something, like realistically, like the theme needs to fit, like some things definitely need to fit, but like find a good match. It's about finding a good match rather than trying to get whatever possible funding, you know, there is, because it makes more sense to make two applications which are in which you have a chance to actually receive the funding, because it's a good match. And then there's obviously more work looking for that match or waiting for that match. It's like another whole precarious situation leading up to that. But in the end, you still like, because as a result, you spend more energy on your art, or on developing something that you actually want to do, and you will find a match. I mean, maybe it's again like I really feel like I'm like super naive in this whole chat that we're having now, but I'll just keep on being naive. That's just but you know, like,
enjoy it. No, really embrace it, because it won't last.
I don't know. I feel like I've been always like this. But it's like find the right match, and put energy into writing an application for a good match, rather than putting loads of energy into something that you even don't care about just to like get money. But it's like, obviously, perhaps even it's not even an ideal scenario. It's just like a different way of treating those funding opportunities, because I really think it doesn't make any sense to like make your art different. It's about creating, and also, and if there isn't funding, then that's like a gap.
You resort to crowdfunding.
Yeah, but it's like it's not gonna change, right? If like if an artist compromises their vision and what they believe in based on the funding that is available.
Okay, just to be clear, I'm mocking you about being a bit naive, but I'm still a bit naive in that I still, even to this day, I'm almost 50 years old. I believe, and I still have this hope and belief, that the arts world is based on merit. So if you make quality work, you will be supported. That's my horribly naive and idealistic viewpoint that unfortunately is not true, but I will still stick to it.
See, the problem is, that like when people do something to begin with, they're usually not that good and they need to gain experience in order to improve and develop and then produce something that's much better. You know, you learn from experiences, and I think that it's totally okay to make mistakes, to learn from them, and to improve. And it's that thing of like, you know, you have to put in, is it 10,000 hours into something before you're an expert in it? And it's the problem is that emerging artists, young artists, when they come out of art school and they can't access any funding because they've not got any portfolio or experience, they're then denied the opportunities to gain that experience, and then they go, oh, I just can't make this work, and they go off into some other career that's like they can at least make some, like, make a living out of. And I think this is the problem, that one of our proposals address this issue of funding needs to be made available specifically for emerging artists, young artists who do not have portfolio prior experience, in order that they can gain that experience in order to become the future genius or, you know, super talented person. It doesn't just happen by magic. I actually hate the word talent because it kind of insinuates that it's like some magical skill that's just bestowed on select few individuals and not something that's developed and achieved through bloody hard work.
Just to be clear, I said the word merit, not talent. Because I agree on your issue with talent. That's a horrible word. But merit, it's something deserved through hard work and effort. That's my position on that. But so what were some of the final outcomes and proposals that your think tank has come up with that we haven't already discussed?
I had a quick note on being naive. I think consistent and persistent and collective naivety is important. But yeah, that's a very good point. Well, we kind of mentioned some of them already, like the applications being like more user friendly, more artist friendly. And we talked about just putting more money in art from like the part of the government. And we talked about the like European-wide platform for trustworthy funding sources, and actually quite like,
Love that idea.
yeah, and I also feel like we had like an interesting discussion about it here now. So I feel like it would be great to kind of update that one with like little like specifics, like think like talk about it with our think tank, and then maybe like adjust it a bit. That would be great. And then there was one about, yeah, Madlena, if you remember any, please like step in.
Yeah, so there was quite a few that were about improving
Yeah.
transparency, which is something that you mentioned earlier, of like this issue of like not knowing how or why people are selected or why you've been rejected. So, um, um, urging funding institutions to provide that personalized and constructive feedback. Also, that funding institutions publish all the decision makers and the selection criteria at the beginning of the funding application process. And we also suggested that the European Commission can actually do some research into funding processes, um, um, in order that we can better understand like the challenges and why things are and are not working. Um,
Yeah.
and also funding institutions provide public and accessible records on who gets selected for the funding opportunities, just to improve transparency,
And
really.
we had a few thoughts about education as well. We wanted to, and we also touched upon it a little bit, but we're suggesting that there should be courses available at art schools. I mean, whatever kind of art education institution, about funding and funding opportunities. But equal as much, we would also like to educate the funders, and I think we also kind of mentioned it a little bit, that the funders kind of yeah, so I kind of suggested them that it would be good for them as well if they could publicize their opportunities more. And we kind of, through educating funders on also inclusivity and diversity, we kind of wanted to, already in my head, kind of bring in those two worlds a little bit together. It's not like funders are like against artists and there's like a competition and then one gets it, and like it's not like opposing worlds. Like through that education, we would like to bring these two worlds kind of closer to each other, because somehow they have a relationship with each other, but it's not a very perhaps like functional one for everyone involved. So we thought that was super important as well.
And we had a couple more that were also a bit more political. So, as well as just generally increasing funding, and having funding specifically for emerging artists. We were also recommending that educational and arts institutions strengthen the role of taxpayers as stakeholders in arts and culture by educating and raising awareness of their power to influence funding for the arts, through their votes. And we also, this was a very maybe optimistic and idealist suggestion, but it was that they trial the universal basic income scheme, which is happening in Ireland in other countries, to see if that works and that helps and that legitimizes artists as public sector workers who are providing a valuable service to the public and contributing to society.
We were also, I think that's something that we were more like kind of coming from rather than I mean, it was a part of the solutions as well, but it was kind of like talking about how the house like situation for emerging artists is really precarious, and we touched upon health and mental health as well, because just it's I think it's quite like a simple thought, right? If you don't have stable income, you're not going to be doing great. So that's why the idea for universal basic income for artists, but actually for everybody, was important to have some stability, because that's like a good environment for creating whatever you want to do.
Any last topics that you want to address or talk about?
I wanted to say big thanks to all our think tank members, because it was really nice to be working with them. So, and to like give them credit as well, because it was a collective process, and we're literally just representing what we've been talking about all together. So I think that's quite important. And then obviously big thanks to destructura for creating this space. And also it's super nice to meet you, Matt. I hope that maybe one day we'll see each other in person.
I think we were very fortunate to have a think tank group that worked so well together, and our moderator Vera was also amazing, did an amazing job, and we all worked very constructively and well as a group, because I know other groups struggled a bit more on that. So I think we really appreciate everybody's work and collective work, and I think that's something as well that has really been emphasized by the whole of the Destructura Forum, is that we're stronger when we work together, and we can achieve more when we work together. And I think people often think about artists and quite solitary creatures, and it's true. I am quite a loner, or a bit introverted and whatever. But I do believe that you don't achieve great things until you start building something together with others and working together. And I think that Destructura is providing us with some really great opportunities to envision, a better future, and something that, we can work towards if we just keep plowing on.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To wrap this up, I'd like to thank you for listening all the way to the end of the conversation. We would appreciate it if you would share the podcast with your friends, family, coworkers, studio mates, or anybody with an interest in arts and creative endeavors. The building and strengthening of the arts and creative community is at the core of our mission for this podcast. They can listen and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. We are produced by 5014, and the music was created by Pete Bybee. The Wise Fool Art Podcast is supported in part by an EEA grant from Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway in an effort to work together for a green, competitive, and inclusive Europe. We would also like to thank our partners Hunt Kastner in Prague, Czech Republic, and Kunstsentrene i Norge in Norway. Links to EEA grants and our partner organizations are available in the show notes or on our website, wisefoolpod.com.